I will be preaching from our lesson from 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 1 through 18. This is perhaps my favorite story in the entire Old Testament. I know, only Bible nerds like me say we have favorite stories in the Old Testament, but forgive me. Our story opens up in verse 1, and we meet Ahab and Jezebel. If you don't know them, Ahab and Jezebel are the most evil king and queen Israel has ever experienced. Right before this chapter, there has been the showdown of showdowns in Israel. It's like the Super Bowl mixed with Game 7 of the World Series all rolled up into one. It's a competition between Elijah and all the prophets of the false god Baal. And Elijah went all in and said, okay, let's have a showdown. Whoever can get their God to summon fire from heaven and burn up this sacrifice, that'll be the true God. And of course, Yahweh, the God of Elijah, the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that God is the one who finally comes through. And the Israelites run out all the prophets of Baal, and Elijah thinks he's won. One problem, Ahab and Jezebel are still on the throne. And so verse 1 opens up with Ahab and Jezebel telling everything that Elijah has done and how he's ruined all their schemes. And so Jezebel sends what is effectively a death threat to Elijah in verses 2 and 3. Saying, just as you did to my prophets, I'm going to do to you. And when the queen makes a death threat, this is a bit of advice. If you're ever in this situation, take it seriously. So rightfully so, Elijah is afraid. And so first he flees the country. He flees to the southern kingdom of Judah. Then he flees out into the wilderness. And out into the wilderness, he has what is effectively a death wish. And he says to God, it is enough. Now, O Lord, take my life, for I am no better than my ancestors. We meet Elijah at this point, and he's effectively burned out. He's depressed. He's exhausted. He's tired. And the real secret to burnout happens not because we feel like we're overworked, but burnout happens because we feel like our work is meaningless, right? And so Elijah here feels like all his work has been meaningless up to this point. After all, he summoned fire from heaven, and it didn't matter. Ahab and Jezebel are still who they are. Depressed and exhausted and tired and thinking he's failed his whole mission, he sits down under one solitary broom tree and admits he'd like to end his life. Now, the solution to Elijah's depression is, this is one of the things I love about this story. Elijah finds the same solution to his depression that I find to mine. Take a nap and then have a snack. He falls asleep. Then an angel wakes him up and says, hey, eat a Snickers, right, from last time, from when our intern preached. Eat a Snickers. And then he goes back to sleep. I've done that too, right? You get really depressed and you just fall back asleep. Bed looks really good. And the angel wakes him up again and says, yeah, you got to have more to eat. There's a long way to go yet. Then it tells us that in the strength of that food, Elijah walked 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mountain of God. And if you don't know, Horeb has another name. Horeb's name is Sinai. And so he walks all the way to Mount Sinai. And verse 9 says at that point, Elijah came to a cave. This is the only Hebrew lesson I'm going to give you in this sermon. You can say thank you later. Verse 9 is a little bit of a mistranslation. It doesn't say a cave, it says the cave. Elijah came to the cave. There's only one the cave on Mount Sinai. It's the same cave Moses wandered into and saw a burning bush. Elijah has effectively, in his depression and in his exhaustion, wandered back to the holiest spot in his whole religion. And then comes God's question, what are you doing here, Elijah? This is not where I left you, nor is this where you're supposed to be. What are you doing here? And I'd like to think Elijah was preparing this speech as he said, I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the Israelites have forsaken your covenant and thrown down your altars, and they've killed your prophets with the sword, and I alone am left. That's the trick. In his depression and in his exhaustion, Elijah is convinced that he is alone. And isn't that what our depression and our exhaustion and our despair do to all of us? Convinces us that we are desperately alone. God's solution to this problem is, at first, God puts on this vast special effects display, right? So there's a firestorm, there's an earthquake, there's a windstorm, and God's not in any of that. And then you get the sound of sheer silence. And that's when Elijah knows God is present. And you get that question again. What are you doing here, Elijah? Now, Elijah's a better man than I, because at this point I would have lost my mind with God. At the point the question was asked a second time, I would have been like, you sent the angel, and there was the food, and there was the thing out in the desert, and what do you mean, what am I doing here? And Elijah repeats his speech that he feels so desperately alone in this world. And then God says to him, it was great to hear from you. Now you got to go back. And you're going to anoint a couple people. You're going to change politics. I promise you that all the evil people will be dealt with. I promise you that they'll all be covered. And yet, says God, after all the evil people are dealt with, after all the problems are resolved, after you name your successor, and yet there will be 7,000 people in Israel who are still faithful to me. It's basically God telling Elijah, you are not so desperately alone as you think you are. When God tells Elijah, go back to Israel, what God is saying is, you didn't have to wander all the way out to Mount Sinai to find me. I am just as present in the mess that is in Israel as I am here. So go back. And when God says to Elijah, there will be 7,000 people left, what he's saying is, you are not so desperately alone in this world as you think you are. That in response to Elijah's depression and his exhaustion and his burnout, is for God to tell Elijah that you are fundamentally not alone. That I am with you in the mess that is in Israel, and yes, it will change, but I am with you in that mess. And you are not the only one. You are not so alone. I think the message is the same for us today. You can look at all the studies and all the things that show that people are experiencing more depression and anxiety and exhaustion and burnout than ever before. And the truth be told, we all feel it, right? Whether it's the pressures of job or the pressures of family or the combination of job and family or the pressures of finding a job or the pressures of sickness or the pressures of bills. We all kind of feel like Elijah. Depressed, burned out, and wondering if our efforts have led us anywhere and resulted in anything. The message of this God is the same message to us today. The message of this God that came to Elijah, that's the same message for us today. It's a message that says, one, you don't have to go to the top of the mountain. You don't have to go on some great pilgrimage. You don't have to go searching to find me. I am right here. I am with you. I am in the mess. I come to you. You don't have to come to me. That's why we have communion every Sunday. It's why we believe that God is present in bread and wine, that God is truly present. It's because we believe God comes to us and we don't need to go searching. We don't need to put in Google Maps directions to find God. Thanks be to God for that, because mine gets me lost frequently. And not only that, but God is saying to us, not only are you not alone because I'm with you in the depression and the burnout and the anxiety, but not only that, but that I am with you, but also you are not as alone as you imagine. That, yeah, your brain is telling you you're alone, but guess what? Here's a trick I had to learn the hard way. Our minds often lie to us. They don't tell us the truth. Elijah's wrong here. He's not the only one. And when we feel like we are the only one, God is saying the same thing to us. God is saying there's a whole community out there. That's why church is important. There's a whole community out there, so you are not fundamentally alone. And so, as I close, and I promise I'm not going to do the Baptist thing where like I say, and I close, and it takes me another 10 minutes. But as I close, my prayer for you is this. I pray that you may know that you are not alone. That the same God of Israel, the God of Elijah, who tells him to go back because he doesn't need to wander all the way to the cave to find him. You may know that that same God goes all the way to the cross of Jesus Christ for you and so is present even in death. So there is no place that you can escape this God, no place where he is not with you. My other prayer for you is that you know that you are not so fundamentally alone as you imagine. You know that there's this place called church, that God moves us here for reasons so that we may know that we are not as isolated as our minds like to tell us. My prayer is that you will come to the communion rail and know that you will experience God, that God will be with you. Or as Psalm 34 says at the end, my prayer for you is that you will taste and see that the Lord is good. Amen.